This is Gemara and Yoma Daf Lamid Beis. So the learning for this month, the month of Sivan, has been generously sponsored as a shidduch for Yisrael Chaim ben Devaira. Mir Hashem, you should find this shidduch bekarov, and it should go smoothly and of course with incredible clarity. The rest of our chelim as well. Emmanuel Meir Chaim and Sar Shlomo Sivan Reizel Lerbas Gnendel Ita Basimas Chayso Yisrael Memindel Zberz Shavlei Shomas Mami Shavego Shivachana Shmo ben Til Dinam Chan Reizim Chay Besin Lebrachos Tavamutza Dinin Ben Shinamindel Sin Chotav Ben Gay Fasha. I'm sorry, he actually, Baruch Hashem, had a refuah, Sfibin Fegedvem, Bechaz Venetel Huva, Menachem Mendel Mentova, also Baruch Hashem is doing much better. B'soyig Sha'ar Chali Yisrael, as well as Choshidach for Atalea Bas Ita, and we pick it up from the top of Lamid Gimel, Amid Aleph. Just 2 points about, Lamid Beis, Amid Aleph, excuse me. Lamid Beis, Amid Aleph, 3 lines from the top, Tanu, Rabbanan. Just 2 points that we ended off yesterday, just to point out the fascinating idea, is that we said, according to Rameir, how do we have 10? How do we have 5 tefillas and 10 Pishud Yadayim V'Raglayim and 10 times that they are washing their hands by the Kiyar? The fascinating idea is, the Gemara concluded yesterday, that Kipasha Big Day Kodesh, V'Lavash Big Day Chol, Avad Lei Hasam, comes out of fascinating idea that according to our mayor, after the Kohen Gadol redresses into weekday clothing, he's washing his hands again, which is just a fascinating idea. Some of the Bali Muslims speak out from here. They got to bring home the Avodah with you, bring home the inspiration. Even after the whole thing, he gets redressed into his regular clothing and he brings it home. That was number 1. And number 2 is to point out that we did say yesterday, it came out, Tanya, that the Mishnah does not fit with Rav Meir, because according to Rav Meir, there's always 2 Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayims, whereas the Mishnah said the first time there's only 1. Says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbana, now we're going to learn out the Mekar, the source where we know that there's 5 tefillos and 10 times that they sanctify their hands and their legs, their Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayim, back over here, Tanu Rabbanan. And Aaron comes to Oyel Moed. Says the Gemara, Lamu Ba, why did Aaron come to Oyel Moed? You know what this pasuk is referring to? This pasuk is referring to that he came to remove the kaf and the machta, to remove the shovel and to remove the coals in which he left in to the Kodesh HaKadoshim a bit earlier. Shekola Parsha Kula Nemra Ala Seder. Everything in this parsha is written in order. Chutz mi pasuk zeh. This pasuk is unique. It's written out of order. My time, what's the reason? Amar Rav Chisda Gemiri. The reason is because we have this halacha l'Moshe Misina that Chamesh Tfilos Vasar Kedushin Tovel Kohen Gadol Mikadesh Vayvayim V'yi Kisidron, and then we'll speak it out in a moment. And if it is Kisidron, if the Torah was written with the way, is learned the way that it was written, you know what's going to come out? There's only going to be 3 Kiddush Yadayim V'Raglayims and 6 Kiddush, 3 Tfilos, and 6 Kiddushin. Now, basically what happens over here is, in order to make a long story short, let's first go with the way that it happens, and then we'll explain how it got there. Basically, we have 3, which is turning into 5. The way that 3 turns into 5 is as follows. We have the carbon tam in the morning, very good. Then we have the avodah of the Kohen Gadol and Yom Kippur. We have the chatos, we have the different zrikos, and then we have sending the seir la'azazel. That is number 2. Now number 3 is the oila. Number 4 is the removal of the machda, of the coals with the ketairis from the Kodesh HaKadoshim. And number 5 is the musaf. Basically, the simplest way to understand this is that if we did not split up the pasuk, meaning if the removal of the coals was not, what does that mean it was not? Let's say they left the coals in there. Let's remind ourselves. He went into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. He's holding the shovel with the ketairis. He's holding the spoon with the ketairis. He's holding the shovel with the coals. He takes the ketairis, he puts it on top of the coals. How he did that, how he juggled that, we're going to discuss. Then he puts it on the floor and it sits there and the cloud of smoke goes up. Then he goes out and he goes and he does the karban tamid. Now the question is, does he go back in and pick up the shovel? If he did not go back in and picked up the shovel, you know what the whole avodah would be? You would have the tamid in the morning, you would have the avodah, and then you would have the oila of the ayil and the carbon tamid in the Bein Arabayim. There would just be basically 3 stages, which is 6 washing your hands. Where do we get 10? From the fact that we remove the shovel, that splits up the oila and that final tamid, and therefore it makes it that you have the avodah of the yom, then you're going to have the oila, then you're going to have the removal, and then you're going to have the tamid. So miraculously, by removing the shovel, it makes 3 avodas into 5, because it splits up that middle one into 2. And that is, says the Gemara, halacha l'Moshe Sinai, that we learned out from, that there's 5 times they went to the mikveh, 10 times they did kiddush yadayim v'raglayim. Just to point out, when it says gemiri, so Rashi over here, which is Rashi over Shas, says that it means halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Just to point out, there are those who argue and say, I think maybe it's a Rambam, that gemiri is not necessarily the same status as halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Says the Gemara Tanya, we learned in a brayso. How do we know? Which is very different, interesting. What do you mean, how do we know? We don't say it's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Now the Gemara is going to bring psukim, a makar, a source in the Torah. What do we need a source in the Torah for? It's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. This is one of the reasons why the Rambam does not learn gemiri means halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Rather, he learns gemiri just means misaira, and now we need a source in the Torah for that. According to Rashi, it's halacha l'Moshe Sinai, and now we're just bringing a makar for that. Says the Gemara, what is the makar? Talmud it says in the Torah, Ba'aran alel ma'idu pashat es big day abad. And he took off his linen garments, v'rachatz b'sara b'mayim, and he washes his body in water, b'makayim kadosh. Then it continues, v'lavish es begadav, then he puts back on its clothing. V'yatz, and he goes out, v'asa, and he does the avodah. What do we see from this pasuk? Shekol ha'mishane, me'avodah la'avodah. Anytime you're changing between one avodah and the next, ta'un tefillah, you have to go to the mikvah, and that is the way that we're going to know. Like we said, we learned that from the psukim, that there's going to be 5 different avodas. Now we know that between each and every one, you have to go to the mikvah, equaling 5 times to the mikvah, 10 times washing your hands by the kiyar. That is makar number 1. Makar number 2, Amar Rabbi Yemenayin l'chamish filas v'asar kiddushin sh'day v'l'kayin gadol mekadosh b'biyayim. Shenemar, says Rabbi, Kesoines bad kodesh, you got to wear the linen, yilbash u'michlasi bad, yu'al b'saroy, and the linen garments are on your flesh, u'va'avi bad yakar, and you got to wear the belt, u'b'znefetz bad yitznaif, and the linen hat, big day, kodesh heim, you got a holy garment. And then the Torah says, v'rachatz v'mayim, you wash in water, es b'saroy, u'lebasham, says you wash in water, and then it concludes that, again, you put on the clothing. Halamarata, what do we learn out from here? Again, a second raya that anytime you change your clothing, you got to go to the mikvah. And what does it say? Big day, kodesh, heim, hokshu, kol ha'begadim, kulam zel hazeh. We equate all the different garments all the time. The kohen gadol changes his clothing to this, and therefore we see that every time he changes his clothing, he has to go to the mikvah. Says the Gemara, v'chamesh avodas heim. Like we just spoke out, there are 5 different distinct avodas. What were those 5 avodas, and which clothing did he wear by each? Tamid shel shachar, he starts off the day, big days of golden clothing. V'avodas hayoim, which we spoke at Zir Lazal, the carbon. Tamid, the oil like Secha, the ketayres, the big day love, and the white clothing. Eloi, his ayil, vayilam, and the whole peoples, the big days of back into the golden clothing. Kafu machta, the shovel and the spoon, the big day love, and as he's going to the kedashim with the ketayres. Tamid shel bein arbayim in the afternoon, back to big days of, and that was the 5 steps, the progression that we went gold, linen, gold, linen, gold. Set gold, linen, gold, linen, gold. Yes, 5. Says the Gemara, uminayin, and furthermore, how do we know? So we just brought a raya that there are 5, and we brought 2 different mekayres, 2 different sources that between each and every one, you got to go to the making 5 dips inside the mikvah. Now it says the Gemara, but how do we know the kiddush yadayim v'raglayim? How do we know that he has to wash his hands and his legs by the kiyar? Talmud loymar, it says in the Torah pashat, you get undressed v'rachatz and you wash v'rachatz v'lavash. It says pasha v'rachatz v'lavash. What do we learn out from there? It says the Gemara of Rav Shimon Omer, Kal v'choymer uma b'makom she'ein ta'an tvilo ta'an kiddush. In a place where you don't have to go to the mikvah, you gotta wash your hands. Makom she'ta'an tvilo, you know, did she'ta'an kiddush? Of course, says the Gemara. But imala alon. If not for over there, Kiddush Echad, Afkan Kiddush Echad. Only one time. Tamalay Marubar Oil Maidu Pasha's Big Day Abada Shalavash. Ma Tamalay Mar Shalavash Kulam Adam Paishet. Kulam Adam Paishet Ma Shalavash. Of course, you got to get undressed if you got dressed. Elo, what's that extra lavash teaching me? Lakish Pshita Lavisha Malavisha Don Kiddush Af. Pshita ta'un kiddush. So again, it's a two-stage makar. Number one is when you get dressed, you got to wash your hands, and then we learn out from upasha that when you get undressed, you got to wash your hands, and that is how we're going to get the 10 times that the Kohen Gadol is going to wash his hands and his legs, based off of this fact that the Torah is teaching us upashat and ulavash. Says the Gemara, continuing, we're holding about 8 lines from the bottom. Lamed Beis Amud Aleph. Amar Rav Yehuda, says Rav Yehuda, Menayin l'chamesh tvila. It's another makar. V'asara chamesh tvilas v'asara kiddushin. For where do we know that? Shetoivel kohen gadol mekadosh b'biyayim tamaloi mar ubarin alol ma'id brachas es b'sara b'mayim b'makayim kadosh. He has to wash his flesh in a holy place. Ha'lamadet shkol meshanim avoid lavoidaton. Tefillah. That's how we learn that you need to go to the mikvah. Ashkechan, says the Gemara, big day love and the big days up. Says the Gemara, I only know, again, that was just a quote of what we saw a few moments ago. Again, that was the opinion of Rav Yehuda. If you remember, we brought down 2 different Mekairis. You got to go to the mikvah 5 times. This was the first Mekar of Rav Yehuda, which we'll highlight over here, Tani Rav Yehuda Himer. So says the Gemara, now let's dissect. Let's go a bit further. It's almost like a gufa. Like we go back into the Brisa. Says the Gemara, Ashkechan, I found by big day lavan, le big day zav, ume big day zav. How do we know the other way? How do we know that we go from golden to linen? Tanad Rabbi Yishmael, as we turn over to Amud Beis, he learns kalva chaymer. Uma big day zav she'ein kayin nichnas behem, the golden clothing. You're not allowed to go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Holy of Holies, lifnai v'lifnim. Yet on tefillah, you got to go to the mikvah. Big day lavan, when you're putting on the white clothing. Holy shenichlas b'hem lifnai v'lifnim. You go into the place that no one in the world aside for you is allowed to go, the Holy of Holies. Einai din, certainly sheta in tefillah. So says the Gemara, that's how we know. We know number 1, big day zav is the Torah, and then we know kalva chaymer to big day lavan. If you have to go to the mikvah before you put on the mirror golden vestments, not mirror, it's a kohen gadol, only he can wear them. But he has to put them on for the simple, we'll call it avodah. Certainly the linen garments, the white clothing that goes lefnai v'lefnim, the kodesh hakadashim, only on the Holy of Holies, the kohen gadol certainly has to go to the mikvah. Says the Gemara, really? Ikla mifrach, I'll ask you a question. Of course, we always have the juggle over here. On one hand, big day lovin is greater. You go lifnai v'lifnim kodesh hakadashim. But I asked the Gemara, what do you mean? On the other hand, the big day zav is greater. You know why? Because it gives you a lot of kapara. You use it for many different avodas. Ella, says the Gemara, nafkele midir Rabbi, a different makar. Well, they're now from Rabbi. And now the Gemara goes in to exactly what Rebbe was. Again, that was Rabbi Yehuda. And now we're going to go into Rebbe. Rebbe's pasuk of as we're going to see, is that Rabbi Yehuda is going to agree to this aspect. Says the Gemara, Amar Rebbe. Again, so the first mikvah was Rabbi Yehuda. Now we go into Rebbe. How does he know the 5 mikvahs and the 10 times washing your hands? Each time you change clothing, got to go to the mikvah. Ashkechan, the same question we asked a moment ago. Very good, I understand. We have a source from big day zav, big day love, and big day love, and big day zav. How do we know the reverse? How do we know when you're going from white to gold? Minayin tanad very small kalva chaymer. Uma big day love and chain kabaras and meruba. This should sound familiar because it's the exact flip of what we saw a moment ago. When it comes to the white vestments, you do not have a lot of kapar. You don't wear them a lot. Yet, for according to Rebbe, we have a makarta on tefillah, big dizav. Shekabaras and miruba. On tefillah. Says the Gemara, what's the question? What we said before, the question is, there you could go all the way inside. Says the Gemara, Hainu diktani. That is why we brought down Another pasuk, Rabbi says, "Va'omer big day kodesh ein v'rachas as besarai b'mayim v'lavshan v'chame v'lavsham." That is why Rabbi learned out the second pasuk. The second pasuk, when it says v'lavsham, referring to the golden clothing, teaches us that he has to go to the mikveh even between white and gold. So again, before we continue, basically the first part of the brayso, so we had two mekayres, two sources that you have to go to the mikveh 5 times. We had Rabbi Yehuda, we had Rabbi. Both according to Rabbi Yehuda and according to Rabbi, we wanted to say Kal V'Chaimer. Not only do you have to go to the mikveh from clothing A to clothing B, you have to go to the mikveh even from clothing B to clothing A. And each one, we had the other question. Basically, the 2 points are, Big Day Lavan are extremely holy because you wear them lefnai v'lefnin, the Kodesh HaKodashim. On the other hand, Big Day Zav are incredible. They give you kapara often. And those, on one hand, it's a question, on the other hand, it's a raya. That was the 2 stages. And the Gemara concludes that according to Rabbi, we have an additional pasuk that allows us to learn it back and forth. And now we continue the brayso that we quoted in Amar Aleph, says the Gemara v'chamish avodas hein. There were 5 avodas. What were they? Tamish al shach b'dei zav, avodas hayom b'dei lavan, elu v'aylo ha'am b'dei zav, kafu machla b'dei lavan, tamish al bin arbaim b'dei zav. Those were the 5 different avodas. Now the brayso continues. U'minayit shekol tefillah tzricha beis kiddushin. How do we know that each and every time that you go to the mikvah, each and every avodah, I'm sorry. One more time. How do you know each and every time you go to the mikveh, you need to wash your hands 2 times? Upashat v'rachat, v'rachat v'lavash. Hi b'tvila ksiv. Hi b'tvila ksiv. I'm sorry, that's a question. One more time. Let's read that properly. Again, go back a second. Sricha beis kushit amleimer upashat v'rachat. Says the pasuk upashat v'rachat, v'rachat v'lavash. That's the makar that each time you go to the mikveh, you got to wash your hands 2 times as well. Asks the Gemara, Hi b'tvila ksiv. What's going on? The pasuk there is talking about when it says v'rachatz v'lavash, it's talking about going to the mikvah. So how are you using that as a source to wash your hands and the legs by the kiyar? Explains the Gemara. We already learned out the makar, the source to go to the mikvah. So why do we need this extra pasuk for? Use it for washing your hands and your legs. Says the Gemara, 1 second. If what you're saying is right, that the pasuk of Pashat V'Lavash is talking not about going to the mikvah, but rather about washing your hands and your legs in the kiyar, and kiddush. So the Torah should have just written it in the lashon of kiddush, of sanctifying your hands. Why does it use a word that sounds like mikvah? Why does it use the word virachat? Rachat sounds like a whole body. Answers the Gemara, Hakamashlan, the tefillah kiddush. Going to the mikvah is equatable to sanctification. Ma kiddush b'makom kadosh, the kiyar. Tefillah b'makom kadosh. That is the drasha. Says the Gemara. Very good. Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rabbi Yehuda, kiddush minale. From where does Rabbi Yehuda know this halacha that has to be b'makom kadosh? Nafklei midrash Rav Shimon amar Rav Chisda milazar Rav Shimon. He learned it out from Rav Lazar Rav Shimon, the Kal V'Chaimer, like we saw in Amid Aleph. Omar Rav Chisda, again continuing the brayso, we quoted on Aleph that we said the Rebbe Mafka, that we learned it out for the din of Rebbe. Says the Gemara, Midrabei had the Rebbe. Mafka midrameir or mafka midrabanan. Then when we said we learn it out from Rebbe, mafka midrabeir or mafka midrabanan, that means that the source is Rebbe and not Rameir and not the Rabbanan. And now the Gemara explains, mafka midrabanan excludes the opinion of the Rabbanan, the Rabbanan Hamri. What did the Rabbanan hold? Kishu loivesh mikadesh. The Rabbanan hold that when you get dressed, that's when you have to sanctify yourself 2 times. V'ihu amar, what does he hold? This is Reb Meir. Again, this should ring a little bit of a bell from yesterday. We started off today and we pointed out the Mishnah is not like Reb Meir, because Reb Meir holds each time you go to the mikveh, you do 2 times. Says the Gemara, the Rabbanan Amrikshu loivish, when you get dressed. V'ihu, what does he hold? What does Reb Meir hold? Kishu paishe mekadesh. Like we remember, if we ended off yesterday, the Brisa taught us that the Kohen Gadol gets undressed, washes his hands, and then goes to the mikvah. That was only in Reb Meir. According to the Rabbanan, that would never happen. Says the Gemara, as well, umafka mid Reb Meir. The Reb Meir amar kiddush b'asra kshu loivesh mikadesh, v'yomer kshu paishein mikadesh. So says the Gemara, The fact that we're saying we're going with Rebbe teaches us that we're not going with Rabbanan and we're not going with Rameir. Again, let's speak this out again. We're not going with the Rabbanan. I'm sorry, I think I said it a little incorrectly. We're not going with Rabbanan because Rabbanan hold that we always only sanctify the Kohen's hands when he is dressed. And we're not going with Rameir. The Rameir said that no, the last one, remember that's what we started with today, that after he puts on his weekday clothing, he does the last one. This Brisa does not hold like that. When you get undressed the final time. Everyone agrees. Everyone agrees, even Rabbi, that the second time you wash your hands, how do you do it? You first get dressed, and then you wash your hands and your legs. How do we know? Says the Torah when they come close to the Mizbeach. And we learn out from there, you have to be at a stage that the only thing you're lacking is approaching, walking to the Mizbeach, meaning you're already dressed. So it excludes someone who's not dressed yet. And therefore, that's everyone's going to agree that the second time. Why not? Because if that was true, what's going to happen. According to Rebbe, there are going to be 15 Kiddushin, because if you come out according to Rebbe, there's going to be 3 each time, which we know is impossible. Rather, it has to be only 2 according to Rebbe. So says the Gemara, Rav Acha cannot and Rav Chisda do not hold like Rebbe, and we're going to pick up on the 2 dots tomorrow.